Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Scene Change. I'm Chris Nussbaum, a board member of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division and a member of our podcast team. I know you're not used to hearing my voice on the podcast, so let me tell you why I'm here for a couple minutes. The team felt that we should take a minute to acknowledge something very special that happened a couple days after we recorded the episode for this month. On July 10th, at the banquet of the National Convention of the National Federation of the Blind, the host of our podcast, Lizzy Mohammed Park, was honored with the $12,000 Kenneth Jernigan Scholarship, the highest award bestowed upon college students by the National Federation of the Blind. So that's a very well deserved honor, and all of us in the Performing Arts Division are really proud of Lizzy and very thankful for all that she does in everything. In her life, but especially the leadership she provides in our division as our vice president and as the host of our podcast. So
That's true.
huge thanks, Shane. So huge congratulations to Lizzy from all of us at the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Great job, Lizzy. Well deserved. Thanks for all you do. So, with that out of the way, let's jump into this month's episode, and it's a very special episode indeed. We'll now let you enjoy our live recording of Scene Change from National Convention as we hear all about audio description.
Welcome to Scene Change, a podcast by the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. All about equality, opportunity, accessibility, and the arts. Here, you'll learn adaptive techniques from performers in the know. We are changing what it means to be blind, one stage at a time. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scene Change. I'm Lizzy Mohammed Park, the Vice President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division, and your host of the show. Now, if you listen to this podcast, you know that with every episode, I promise you that it is our best one yet. And I always mean it, but today, I really mean it. This is our 10th episode. We're recording it in a live virtual setting. And we've got joining us today Roy Samuelson, who is a leading, well-respected Hollywood voiceover artist. He's been doing this for over 20 years, and he's done all kinds of commercials from Target to McDonald's, you name it. Apparently, people worldwide say, hey, I know that voice. Up next, we've got someone who really needs no introduction. We think of him as our Utah affiliate president and a national board member because he is. But you probably didn't know that he managed several blockbuster locations in Texas and has a degree in music. Everette Bacon, who serves as the Federation's representative on the Disability Advisory Committee to the FCC. And last, but certainly not least, we have Dr. Joel Schneider. He is the author of The Visual Made Verbal. He's the president of Audio Description Associates, and he is the founder and senior consultant of the Audio Description Project. Thank you each for joining the show. I've told the audience a little bit about what you do, but in plain English, could you just give us an overview of what your job entails as far as audio description?
Awesome. Thanks. My name's Roy Samuelson, and thank you for the introduction. I've recorded about 1,000 episodes of feature films and television shows for audio description voicing. I'm not a writer, I'm just the voice, but I've been a pretty strong advocate to make sure that blind people are included in this work. And I've interviewed about 100 or so plus professionals in audio description, including a lot of the panelists here. So it's a real honor to be here. Thank you.
That is awesome. We're glad to have you. And up next, how about Joel Schneider?
Hi, Lizzy. Thank you so much. What a great honor it is to be on a panel with my friends Roy Samuelson and Everette Bacon. I know them both well, and as marvelous advocates in particular for audio description. And that's where I place myself. I was a part of the very first group of audio describers. We pioneered the idea, the name, back in 1981. In the Washington, D.C. area. My background is in theater and voice work, but I had been a volunteer reader at the Washington Ear radio reading service in D.C. And that's where the world's first ongoing audio description service was started, as I say, back in 1981. And I've stayed with it for about 40 some years now, doing description, writing description, voicing description in all genres. And training describers, speaking on description in, golly, over 40 states and 60 some countries now. So, but it is a pleasure to be back with the NFB. I remember doing several workshops some years back when you had your conference in Atlanta, and it was great fun. Look forward to working with you further.
Thank you so much. We're so glad to have you. And last but not least, Everette Bacon.
Hi, Lizzy. Again, it is also a pleasure to be on this panel with two good friends, Roy and Joel, who are outstanding audio describers and outstanding advocates in the field of audio description. I kind of came into audio description as an enjoyer of audio description. Back when I was managing Blockbuster Videos, I was not a member of the National Federation of the Blind, and I was just kind of doing my own thing as this store manager, and I happened to manage the store in Texas, the only store in all of Texas at the time that had audio described video cassettes, VHS cassettes. And so we had those. I was able to get those as part of the manager of the inventory. And so we had them there. And that's kind of how my introduction to audio description. And from there, I've done a lot of advocacy with movie theaters in not only in Texas, but now in Utah. When I moved to Utah in 2004, we didn't have a theater with audio description at all. And so that kind of became my focus. And I've now expanded that to, because now all of our theaters have audio description, thanks to the work of outstanding organizations like the ACB and the NFB and advocates out there everywhere. But now that I've kind of focused on live theater and all kinds of other things, and then being a part of the National Federation of the Blind, I've been able to work with the FCC and on their Disability Advisory Committee on things like making sure that general guidelines for audio description are out there. And I know that's a big passion of Joel's as well. So that's a little about me.
That is excellent. So glad that you could join us today. Now, Joel, would you mind telling us a bit about how you got started in audio description? Was there any specific training or, maybe connections, experience that led to your success in the field?
Wow. Well, sure. Golly, this goes back a little ways. I'm the oldest person on this panel, I think. I don't know. Me. But no, again, my background is in theater and media and voice work and such. And similarly to Roy, hello, to Roy's. But in the 70s, I was already a member of Actors Equity Association and AFTRA at the time. And I had been doing, just in my spare time, reading books to people who are blind as a volunteer. I had recorded talking books for the Library of Congress, and actually in 1972 joined with the Washington Ear, the radio reading service, as a volunteer reader. And my main assignment was the Washington Post on Sundays. And come on, what's the first thing people turn to when they get their Sunday paper? Be honest, right? The comics. I realized, gee, how am I going to read the comics without describing the images? They're all about the images. And so I fumbled around and tried to describe as best I could, but it was not till 1980 when Dr. Margaret Pfanstiel, the founder of the Washington Year, a blind woman, and Chet Avery, a blind Department of Education worker, they were both on a panel at Arena Stage and being about accessibility and being told about assistive listening for the first time. Isn't that great? And they figured, well, golly, if it's just a microphone on stage, couldn't someone hold a microphone off stage and describe what's happening on stage for the benefit of people who are blind, using the pauses between bits and pieces of dialogue or sound elements. And Arena Stage, to their credit, said, let's give it a try. So Margaret, back to the ear, she knew I was there, of course, as an Englisher and a performer and a volunteer there for almost 10 years at the time. She pulled me off to the side with around 3 or 4 others, and we began to hammer this thing out, this thing that would be called audio description. And the first play began in performing arts. The first production was Major Barbara at Arena Stage in the summer of 1981 that was described. And then we went on from there. Several years later, I wrote and voiced some of the first audio described broadcast television pieces for WGBH on the old American Playhouse back in 1985. I do want to mention quickly, though, that Gregory Fraser was the first person to write about the idea of audio description, and that was in 1977 or 78 as a master's thesis at San Francisco State University. So all due credit to the late Gregory Fraser, and of course to the late Margaret Pfanstiel as well.
So if I may oversimplify what you just said, you started off reading the paper, describing the comics, and then you went into describe plays, and then you just kind of met with the right people and just started doing audio describing everything.
Pretty much. That's kind of what happened.
Fascinating.
I guess. It's not just the comics, of course. The newspapers are
of course
graphic and photographs, and so we tried to describe them as well. Not just we were all of the readers were bumping into that issue, but there was no formal way to do it. There was no structure. There were no fundamentals for audio description, and we developed them over time.
Wow. Now, Everette, we know how you got started, with some different audio description things and things like that in Blockbuster. But I wonder if you have any recommendations for people who'd like to get involved with advocating for audio description.
The biggest thing is they need to work with a local organization that and get a group together that would reach out to movie theaters or live venues or Sundance film festivals, things like that. Those kinds of areas are still lacking in audio description. And then people really need to lobby the FCC. Not enough people lobby the FCC, complain to the FCC, and we need more of that out there. And if anyone wants help in doing that, all 3 of us are excellent people to help you advocate with the FCC, because the more people we get out there doing that, the better, and the more audio description quantity and quality we will get.
Now, don't go away just yet. I have a follow-up question for you. I love that you mentioned getting a group together, and I don't remember the verb that you used, but advocating at, for example, a local movie theater. Isn't that what you did when you got started in Utah? Or was it something different? I read that there was a local movie theater, and you pushed there's a local chain, and you really pushed for advocacy and for audio description in the theater. Is that true?
That is exactly right. After I was living here in Utah, I just moved here, and I wanted to go see a movie audio described, and none of the theaters had it. Megaplex Theater is a local chain in Utah, and they have about 6 different theaters all over the state of Utah. And so I was a member of the National Federation of the Blind of Utah, the Salt Lake chapter, and just myself, I led the group with about 5 other members, we got a meeting with the CEO of Megaplex Theater and advocated for audio description, and we made it a big event. He really liked the idea of bringing it to the Megaplex chain, and we were able to get the media involved on television and radio were there and publicize the event. And the first movie was shown, I think it was Toy Story, and it was shown and the entire theater was full of blind people, and they had the audio description live throughout the whole theater so everybody could hear it. And from there, it's just grown exponentially.
That's awesome. And it's great to know that, the size of the group that you had, you don't need 500 people, just, you and just 5 other people can go and make big waves. So I love
Lizzy,
that. That was really nice to
Lizzy,
illustrate. Go ahead.
I hadn't heard that story from Everett in the past. And I don't think I'd heard the story about Blockbuster Video. And, like I say, I'm sure I'm the oldest person on the panel, but how wonderful it is to hear about video cassette tapes, Everett. And it was really quite wonderful. But, back in those days, good old Blockbuster had to have dual inventory, one copy with, one copy without. That takes up a lot of shelf space. How wonderful it was to have DVDs come along where you could turn the description on and off. And of course, now they're passe. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's fine. You guys can chime in whenever you like. I do want to get Roy in here. Now, how did you make, I guess it's not much of a jump, but how did you make I'm going to use the word anyway, because now I can't think of a different word, but how did you make the jump from voice acting to audio describing? What was it that
it's
stood out
really
to
the
you?
same thing. I focus on the performance of the voice, and in audio description, there's so many different roles. There's the casting of who chooses the voice. There's the writer who does the heavy lifting, and Joel's class covers that explicitly perfectly. It's like, that's what the book is all about too. It's like, that is the core of this work. And I've noticed that with all the many roles, whether it's the voice talent or the engineer, and the engineer does stuff so that you don't have to keep futzing with the volume up and down throughout a show, or the placement so that you're laughing at the same time as sighted people and they're laughing at the same time as you. That's all about the different roles, and any of the weakest links of audio description can make the whole thing just not the quality as Everett said. And so a lot of the stuff that I found was a friend of mine had gone completely blind, and we were having a conversation at a really tough time in his life. And it was a point to talk about a TV show that we had seen the first season together, and the second season was when he went blind. And what happened was we had to talk about the funny moments and the cool things that happened in the pitching moments. There wasn't this gap where we had to say, oh, wait, well, this is what happened, because he already knew. And it's because of all the efforts of audio description professionals that made that conversation with my friend happen. That it was that connection, or it was that one more thing that didn't separate us. And I found that in the various roles of audio description and focusing on that experience for blind people, low vision people, to be basically in parity to sighted audiences, that there's a lot of opportunities here to grow that experience for the audience as well as the entertainment providers. And one of the cool things that's happening is more blind people who are professional, who understand the different roles and their contribution to the roles and their experience, their talents can make this work even better. And that's really exciting.
I totally agree with that. And Everett, I know that's something that you wrote about in your, I think it was in the April edition of the NFB, was being able to connect with sighted people, just as Roy mentioned, like at the same time. You're laughing when they're laughing. I know I always hate that lag when, when something happens, everyone laughs, and then it's, oh, she just spilled a glass of water. I'm like, oh, now I get it. And then I hold my hand. I'm like, I don't want to laugh now, because now I'm like, and everybody else is already done. It's really awkward. So I totally agree, Roy, with the need for good audio description. Now, I believe, Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you teach a class on improving audio description. Is it right?
Yeah, it's principally it's principally the writing of description. I've been training folks, 20, 30 years now, all over creation. And I think of audio description as a literary art form. It's about words. The visual is made verbal, is the little trademark of my company, Audio Description Associates. The verbal and oral, A-U-R-A-L, he points to his ear, and oral, O-R-A-L, he points to his mouth. But it's about those words, and that's what the bulk of the class is about. I developed years ago 4 fundamentals to audio description training. First is observation. Second is editing, culling what you see, what is most critical, what are the key visual elements in what you see. Third is language, is the words you use and how to use language to describe motively. And then finally, vocal skills. So we do touch on vocal skills, but when I get, I think it's great voice to, emulate a Roy Samuelson and really get to know about the writing, because there's a synergy, ideally, between the words and the voicing of those words. Roy knows that, and that's what's so great about his classes. He's the only guy out there I know of that does wonderful for voice talents, really focusing in on the voicing. So there's a synergy that I've done audio description institutes for the last 11 years or so for the American Council of the Blind twice a year. This past year, for obvious reasons, we did it virtually, and we have another one coming up in early August. Again, virtually, 5 half days of very intense training in audio description for really anybody, people who are blind, people who are sighted, who want to be audio describers, etc.
And I want to get into that in the next question. So keep this in the back of your mind. Not yet, but about how to go about becoming a blind audio describer. But first, I'd like to jump over to Everette. And based on what Joel was just talking about with regard to writing audio description, and you being someone who is an avid consumer of audio description, this idea of describing with respect. And apparently that really is about what not to describe. So I suppose, you know what I mean? I suppose in my research, they were saying that, for example, for an audio describer to say someone's motivation, a character's motivation, would be disrespectful to the blind person, because they're presuming that we don't know the character's motivation, or that we didn't hear a certain sound that we did hear, different things like that. How do you feel about that as a blind consumer, and the idea of describing with respect?
It's critically important. I've listened to many different audio describers, and the two on the call or this podcast today are two of the best in the field. Both of them, you can find their stuff on Netflix. If you pay attention, you'll start to get their voices. Not all the time. Roy's pretty good at masking his voice, but they're both excellent, and they both do a really outstanding job of knowing when it's appropriate to give the right kind of information. You don't always have to know everything. There are lots of things that we can get from the film itself, and from the script, from the scenes, everything that's going on. But there are certain things that we won't get, and a good audio describer will know exactly what to give us. And then also a good audio writer out there that's writing the audio description for the describer, that's really important too, that they're paying attention to the entire script. They're making note of what should be described and what should not be described. So that's kind of my take on it. I've enjoyed it, and I'm still learning about what I want and what I don't want. And I think I'll always continue to learn about that as I consume more content.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lizzy, the phrase I use oftentimes is that description is quite often about what not to describe.
Mm-hmm.
You get rid of what is not necessary, get to the essence, because there's no time, or because it makes for better description, fewer words.
Mm-hmm.
So the motto is describe when necessary, but don't necessarily describe.
Is it correct to presume that there are audio writers, someone like yourself, who will just, who will write the audio description, and then someone like either Roy or Everett or me or Caitlin or anyone else can just kind of go in and describe? How does that work?
Well, first let me make a little bit of a distinction, because the
Sure.
language can get a little mixed up here. When I use the word describer, I'm referring to the person that crafts the language, that writes the description. Now, in performing arts, oftentimes it's the same person who writes it or composes it in some way and then voices it. But with media, 90-some% of the time, there's a description writer, and then there's a voice talent who voices the description. That's Roy Samuelson's job, and which he does so well. But I really do want to, your point, and I want to echo what Roy said earlier, is nothing about us without us type thing. I believe it's probably, I've had this discussion with Anil Lewis, who's a good friend and of course part of NFB. People who are blind have to be intimately involved in the process of description. And oftentimes you can find, there was a question in the chat, there are any number of excellent blind folks who are, I should say, blind folks who are excellent voice talents. There's no reason why they can't voice description. They use Braille, hard Braille, they use a refreshable Braille display. Sometimes they repeat from a recording. No reason at all. I can think of a number of people who are blind who are excellent voice talents. And some of the best audio editors I know are people who are totally blind. Absolutely no reason they can't perform that function. As far as the writing is concerned, one needs to perceive the image visually in order to describe it. But a person who's blind, who's an avid advocate and an avid consumer, like Everett, can absolutely, quote unquote, write description as a consultant to a sighted person with the sighted person. It's kind of a joint process, really. Again, no reason why a person who's blind can't be an excellent writer, user of language. And that's so valuable. We're getting more, that's becoming a part of the production of description to a bit more degree. It's not where it should be. My good friend Beneke in Germany always produces description with a blind consultant. Every script they produce there. And maybe someday we'll get there too.
That's awesome. At this time, I'd like to check in with Caitlin and see if there are any questions from the chat. Just reminded me, Joel.
Yeah, no, we already had one answered about getting, are there blind people involved in audio description? And the answer is absolutely yes. Someone did ask about audio description and commercials, and the commercials that have no dialogue in them, how we get audio description for those.
Ooh, I love that question, because actually, I'm thinking of a commercial that I had to ask someone about the other day, because I see it all the time, and I'm like, what is this commercial about? So Roy, why don't you take that one? Because you do a lot of commercials. You have a lot of experience with this.
Thanks. I'd love to go back also to some of the other things, echoing what Joel said, that since I started coaching blind talents, I always bring blind professional talents and pay them for their services for that inclusion makes a difference. And the people that take the class, whether they're sighted or blind, say that that's an important part for them. And so this inclusion is not just tokenism. It's actually making the work better. It makes it better. As I heard this from Rick Boggs, that audio description was created by blind people for blind people, as Joel so eloquently said, that this is, when it comes to the roles involved, we've got the voice talent, which is my limitation. There's the writer, there's the engineer, there's the casting, there's the quality control. Those are just off the top of my head, 5 different roles. And when it comes to the film or even commercials, that those different roles are distinct. And some people can do both. I think Joel is an excellent auteur, if I could use that word, that it's when we use these different role titles, it's a little clunky: audio description narrator, audio description writer, audio description engineer. However, what it does is it opens up opportunities for blind people to know that they do have a place here. The ADNA, which is the Audio Description Network Alliance, just produced a brilliant audio description track for a documentary that was done entirely by blind people, including the writing. And that is a gap for a lot of people. People find that very hard to understand. But in the same way that blind people can use an iPhone or an Android device, which is entirely screen. A blind writer can do this work. And that's great that Joel is so focused on making sure that those kinds of people are included. And when I say those kinds of people, I mean those kinds who are skilled and talented and understand the work. And I think that as I look at my career, it's been grown from those opportunities of training, of collaborating with other people and making sure that those opportunities are there. And I'm and avoiding the question of the commercials. I think Procter and Gamble has several different audio description titles they do. They've been, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but Procter and Gamble has a dedicated team that works on audio description, and they do great work. I know there was a Spectrum Access commercial that was for sighted people as well as blind people that included audio description, talking about audio description. And, with the many different aspects of the entertainment industry recognizing this work, audio description was included for the Oscars, both the pre-show, the show, and the post-show. But fascinating about that is that blind people interacted and gave feedback to the live announcers of audio description to say, we want more facial expressions or we want more costumes, that there was literal engagement. And the entertainment industry recognizes that. For the last years, I've been working with the Television Academy, the home of the Primetime Emmys, to include audio description narrators as credits to be able to vote for the Emmys. That's now happened. And that's not just an award. It's being able to vote for the award, but it's inclusion in a way that gives the power to our audiences as well as the creators of audio description. And so these are really exciting times. And I think commercials as well as video games and trailers, all these things are happening a lot. There's a Facebook group called the Audio Description Discussion. And Kevin and I started out maybe a little more than 2 years ago. And it's been a great place for lively interactions. And these kinds of conversations are happening. And what's exciting is, as necessary as the mandate is with the FCC, these are other opportunities that companies are recognizing to bring not only access, but inclusion in a way that it's so exciting. You can hear it in my voice. I'm going to stop.
No, you're doing great. And I'm still going to give you more time to think about that commercial question, but
no, in fact, Roy, I could add in there, Lizzy, at Procter & Gamble, the impetus for a good deal of their work with commercials is from a woman, I do believe a blind woman, I've not met her, Samara Latif. She has been a real leader in doing this. And I've done many commercials for other groups too. It's not as uncommon as you might think. And the question about verbal dialogue, every commercial, I think, at least has some sort of sound track. And as audio describers, we need to have respect for the creator of the work we're describing. They put those sounds there for a reason, and we need to let them be there. When I described Empire Strikes Back years and years ago, the Star Wars film, how dare I, it would, if I tried to describe over da 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 da, that's the theme. God, I better let that be there, and I did. Thank goodness. So, even with no verbal dialogue, it's another kind of challenge when there's no words at all, different from the challenge of getting description in a quarter of a second, because that's all that there is, something like that.
I'm going to ask you about that in just a second, about, how do you fit several words into such a small amount of space? And, but first I want to hop over to Everette, and I want to ask him, because Roy mentioned something earlier about the Oscars being audio described, and I had no idea. Yeah. So Everette, how do people know when things are being audio described? Like, where can people go to kind of find out, like, the Oscars are going to be audio described this year?
Well, I can jump in.
I was going to say, if not, we can.
I founded the audio description project with the American Council of the Blind about 11 years ago, precisely for that reason. One of the reasons, anyway. The Audio Description Project website, acb.org/ADP. We make it our business to make certain that every television program that has description is listed on our website in real time. The DVDs that come out, or what streaming services offer description, movie theaters that offer description. We have by state, every state that has description in museums, that has description in performing arts. So that's one certainly one resource. I see it's back online.
Yep, that's definitely the main resource, because that's the one I go to first and foremost when I look for it. And I even talked about that in the article that I wrote for the Braille Monitor and on the blog. But the other areas you can look at, NFB Newsline. If you look at the TV listings on NFB Newsline, you'll notice that there is every one of the ones that has audio description is listed there. It'll have a little AD symbol, and the Newsline will read that to you, so you know. Many of the movie theaters now, they also have it listed now when you call them on the phone, or if you get the newspaper listings at movie theaters, they also will demonstrate have an AD symbol. And any of the movie theaters, if you go to their websites, also they will show what films are having audio description with it, which is now more than ever. Almost every single movie is coming out with audio description, and it has the little AD symbol on it. Then if live venues is the harder one to find, so you have to kind of dig a little bit with live venues. You need to contact the venue itself and ask about that. If they don't, sometimes you'll get someone that just doesn't know. So try to get someone in authority. So ask questions. If you could speak to a manager, you could speak to somebody higher up to find out where it is. And if they don't have it at all, well, now that's your opportunity to advocate for it. We've now gotten 5 different live venues here in Salt Lake City and the surrounding counties to start having their plays and musicals with live audio description, which is a lot of fun. So that's something that you can do, and you can find it in those types of places as well.
Now, Everett, when you say that's an opportunity to advocate, so for me, for example, when I'm advocating it for things like in school, for example, I kind of have like a framework of, this is what I need. This is how I usually go about it, XYZ. But if someone is new to advocating for audio description and the theater, for example, says, okay, what do we need to do? And it's kind of like, well, I don't know. Obviously we can contact you, but just as like as a starter, as a frame, as a base, a foundation, what do people need to do what do theaters need to do in order to become more accessible?
So the first thing they need to do is they need to figure out how they're going to do it. Again, the Audio Description Project, the website, has information for theaters on how to do this. So I definitely refer them to that website. Or if you want to go ahead and get that information yourself and print it out for them, that's a good idea too. But there are several theaters will look at different ways of doing it. The new way is to give the blind individual that's coming to enjoy it a little handheld device that's about the size of a transistor, an old, small portable radio or one, and you take that with the headphones. Sometimes they provide you with headphones, or you can bring your own headphones. I prefer to bring my own. I don't really like to share headphones, but, and you have that device and you listen as you're out there. And then there's the person doing the narrating, and the narrating is in a soundproof booth, and they're providing the narration for you. When there is no dialogue going on in the play or in the musical, and so that's, if you can explain that to the theater, that's usually enough to get them going in the right direction, and that's what you want to do. And you want to explain it in your own words as an actual consumer, and you want to tell them, you're going to add business by doing this. More blind people are going to come. And there are a lot more blind out there than they realize, because, the senior population is, let's face it, going blind. And so, and they love to go to plays and musicals. And so that's the kind of way you just have to kind of put it in words that make sense to theater managers, and that kind of stuff usually does.
Next time on Scene Change, you'll hear questions from our live virtual audience, including those about audio description in musicals, bringing AD to a theater near you, and the costs associated with doing so. Spoiler alert for you, It'll cost nothing. Our panelists will also discuss the future of AD, and you'll learn the who, what, when, where, why, and how of audio description training. All this and more if you'll stay tuned for part 2 of this program, airing on August 15th, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening today.
I'm Caitlin McIntyre, President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scene Change. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at nfb-pad.org. There you'll find links to our social media, membership, and resources for blind performers. Thanks to everyone who makes this show happen. Scene Change is produced by Shane Lowe, Chris Nussbaum, Seun Choi, and Precious Perez, with music by Ryan Strunk and Tom Page. Remember, you can be the performer you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. We'll see you next time.